Welcome to the Bulgarian Troglodyte. My name is SJS. Today I'm gonna talk about my top 25 films of the 1970s. So originally, when Solitary Ronin did his 70s list, I only responded with an underrated 70s list, but now I'm gonna do my actual top 25. It was a very hard list to compile, as 1970s is my second favorite decade for cinema, so I had to leave out many films that I love. And of course, always the ordering of the films is also very hard. And tomorrow the order might look very different, and tomorrow some of these films might be other films too. Yeah, but anyway, let's get right into it and also let me know your favorite 70s films. I'm not gonna really get into this first one as I did a deep dive to this film a couple months ago with Altes on the first episode of As Jazz Recommends. And we talked a lot about the themes of the film. It was a very interesting conversation. But yeah, this is actually my favorite Fassbinder film. It's in my top 10 of all time. It's dark, but also very funny. It explores class relations, the bourgeois, the working class, and how hard it is to move from class to class, and how hard it is to change your habits and ways when you move from a class to another. So those are some of the basic themes of the film. But if you want to learn more about it, you can check out the first episode of As Chess Recommends. Yeah, this was a great film to start the podcast with. Then we have Kitsu Yoshida's Heroic Pergatory, another film that can be found on my top 20 of all time list. And this will also be talked about on our podcast at some point, although I'm very scared to talk about it as it is one of those films that is so hard to analyze. I really don't know what this film is about. It's very much of a non-narrative film, very abstract, very ambiguous. But that's what I love about it. Like I always say on my channel, I don't have to understand a work of art to love it. I usually actually love these films and works of art more that I don't understand because I find that really fascinating when I don't understand something. And I like these types of like what the fuck type of films that are just so weird and different that they just kind of blow my mind often. I have this sense of awe when I watch films like this. And Yoshida is known for his very unique kind of brutalist shot compositions, so the angles are very off-putting. The characters are placed in like weird places in the shots, often in the like a up right corner, for example. You might see the characters when usually in films the characters are in the center of the shot. And the angles are often very steep, which makes them look very brutal and off-putting and alienating. But I actually absolutely love his style, and it's kind of brutally beautiful, you could say. But this is such a fascinating film, and hopefully one day I will understand it more. But now I can just be in awe of it because I find all the ambiguity so fascinating. Yeah, what a masterpiece! Should be talked about more. Then we have another Fassbinder film, perhaps his most accessible out of his kind of big films. So it's Ali, Fear is the Soul, another masterpiece about this taboo relationship between this older German woman and a migrant. And we see how and other people make fun of them, other people are very toxic to them, which is very hard to watch because in the end, these two people love each other, both of them are adults. So why does it matter that one is a migrant, one is a German, one is older and one is younger? What does it matter? But of course, I think we people often kind of automatically judge people even when we shouldn't. Again, judge people, and sometimes it's really hard to um, not judge people even though you maybe can logically say that yeah, it doesn't make any sense to judge people, but sometimes people just judge people even though it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But as a hardcore humanist myself, I think we should let adults do whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. Yeah. People should be allowed to love whoever they want. Of course, there are certain uh, things when it isn't okay. Again, when one person doesn't consent, for example. But in general, we can let people do whatever they want, hang out with people that they want, and etc. 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 And this is the type of film that makes you really think about those themes, I think. But it also has its funnier moments. It has that kind of classic Fassbinder, fairly minimalist visual style with some great framing and great shots. Yeah. For example, when they are sitting next to each other in the restaurant and we see them through the door, I think that's a great shot. And even in their apartment, there are many great shots, I would say. Yeah. Definitely a film that makes you think about social norms and relationships and maybe your own biases and maybe your own rigid ways of thinking. Yeah. Then this one is also quite hard to talk about, kind of like Heroic Purgatory. So it's Valerie and her Week of Wonders. So this isn't very plot heavy film, it's more kind of atmosphere and cinematography driven film. It's absolutely beautiful, very dreamlike, again, gothic. It's a horror film, but in a very beautiful way. Yeah, it's just absolutely stunning in its shot composition and everything. Yeah, I just absolutely adore films like this. Although, of course, these types of films tend to be fairly divisive. Yeah, many people don't like films where there isn't a very clear plot that goes from A to B. But to me, I love these types of more abstract, more surreal films, and this is one of the best of those. This is usually in somewhere in my top 25 of all time. Then we have Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, my favorite Tarkovsky film. Watched it a few times. Always, every time I watch it, it makes me think about different things, and that's a mark of a very deep and great film. But of course, Tarkovsky always says that you should feel my films and not analyze them to death. But I think this is one of his films that just makes you want to analyze some of the themes, especially some of the kind of analytical themes, like what are your true unconscious desires and things like that. That's one of the themes that comes to you towards the end of the film, for example, because psychoanalysis is all about the kind of unconscious part of your brain and things like that. So you start to think about that, and of course, the three different characters all represent different types of people. So you just kind of immediately start to analyze many of these things, even if you try to take the approach of Tarkovsky that you just try to feel the film. But this film is also just one that you can just sit back and look at the absolutely perfect cinematography, the angles, again, the very fascinating environment and everything. Just so you can watch it just by sitting back and admiring the visuals. But I think, at least to me, it always makes me think about many of the different themes of the film as well. And this will be fascinating to talk about on my podcast at some point. Yeah, Saltes hasn't seen it yet, but he has seen some other Tarkovsky films. I really love those, so I think he will be blown away by this when we talk about it. So, and this is one of those films that I would again nominate for the conversation about the greatest films of all time or the greatest film of all time. Yeah. To be honest, these days I would take this over 2001, for example. So it's just so good. Then we have Ken Russell's The Devils, obviously a film that also can be quite divisive. And I can imagine if you watch this as a religious person, you will often hated, although maybe not always, but often at least. But to me, this is just an absolutely incredible film, incredibly funny as well, and I love the Urbain Grandier character played by Oliver Reed. At first, he seems like an asshole, but then you kind of root for him in the end when the world turns against him. And I really like that one kind of fanatical priest character, Father Bar, I think is the character name. I think that's one hell of a performance. Like, yeah, and it's actually funny in all of his fanaticism. Yeah, and many absolutely insane scenes. This is a very kind of again interesting looking film visually. Lots of great shots, lots of great sets as well, and yeah, good critique of the repressive nature of Christianity and Catholicism. Yeah, yeah, I think this is a masterpiece, and hopefully it one day will get a nice release. Then we have Ingmar Bergman's Höstsonaten or Autumn Sonata, one of my favorites by him, or the one that makes me the most emotional out of Ingmar's filmography. Yeah, it's about this very toxic mother-daughter relationship, and I think people who come from very dysfunctional families and who have toxic toxic relationships with their parents, they can really relate to this film like I can because I have had all of those things. And it doesn't have to be like a daughter-mother relationship. I can also relate to it having a again a son and a mother relationship. And powerhouse performances by both Ingrid Bergman and Liv Ullmann. Very minimalist film, but it's also quite beautiful looking. And it's just one of those films that really makes you think about your own life too. It feels like this has actually gotten more and more highly rated on Letterboxd. Because as you can see here, it's like 4.5. I don't remember it being that high. It's in like top 30 of Letterboxd. People seem to really love this these days then, which is cool to see because again, I was blown away when I saw this for the first time and also when I rewatched it. An incredible film. Incredible film. It's hard not to shed some tears when you watch that one. Then another Bergman film, it's Viskningar och Rop or Cries and Whispers. Top 3 Ingmar film. Look at this shot. I mean, this is one of his best looking films. Love the use of color. In this one, this is a very dark film. And I think a good example of again his kind of trademark of doing like great or having like great female characters in his films. Yeah, this is a great example of that. It's quite disturbing, has some moments of masochism, lots of darker emotions, lots of repression. It's not an easy watch. I actually saw this on the cinema for the first time, and yeah, it really blew me away. And but I also loved it on a second watch at home. And this we will probably talk about on the podcast as well. So yeah. Then this one I've talked about quite a few times on my channel. It's one of my absolute favorite American films. It's Being There by Hal Ashby. About this gardener who gets to a fairly high place in society because people mistake him for being very intelligent. And of course, that might make you think about certain political figures of the recent years. And it has those kind of political undertones there. And again, society, people often get obsessed about pseudo intellectuals and gurus who actually aren't intellectuals and who actually aren't very smart, but people just have that herd mentality and people get just obsessed about the, you could say, false prophets or whatever, even though I'm not religious. Yeah. But it's also a very funny movie. I always enjoy watching it. Like especially in the second half of the movie when he kind of gets into that again that big mansion and stuff and There are lots of funny encounters there. So you can also watch it as a kind of a feel-good movie, even though it has those darker themes under there as well. Great, great movie. Then we have Eraserhead, David Lynch's feature debut. Very disgusting looking movie. Absolutely love it. Took me a couple of viewings to fall in love with it, but now I've seen it 4 times. And yeah, to me, this film is all about social anxiety and anxiety in general, because we can see kind of how the main character again is very scared of everything in his environment. He hears the buzzing of the kind of electronic appliances and everything. So we can see that he sees everything as a threat. And that's kind of a what anxious brains do to you. Again, as someone who can really relate to that stuff. Yeah. But I also love just the visuals. Even though it looks very disgusting, but it looks beautifully disgusting, I guess. Yeah, what a movie. Then we have another Japanese film that where the narrative doesn't matter that much. It's pastoral to die in the country. You get these crazy colors, these crazy visuals throughout the whole movie that you see in this great shot. This is on YouTube. This is on the Rare Film website if you want to watch it. Okay, this is one that people tend to love, but just not enough people watch it. It's really hard to talk about as it isn't like very clearly about anything, as it is one of those films that you can just vibe to and you admire the beautiful shots and the visuals and all the weirdness of it. But yeah, this is one of the best kind of non-narrative films. Japanese New Wave is a gift that keeps on giving. Then actually we have another kind of non-narrative, kind of visually driven, and also narration-driven film. So it's Marguerite Duras' masterpiece, India Song. Okay, Marguerite Duras was a famous 20th century author, but also a great director and a great screenwriter. He even wrote Hiroshima Mon Amour that will appear in my top 25 of the 50s. But this is all about colonialism. It's set in India, and we see the Western influence in India. And then we have this fairly again um, complex narration, as many Dura films have. So it's not again doesn't have much of a plot. It's all about the vibe. It's all about the message, the theme. Yeah, but I love Dura's films. They definitely aren't for everybody, but again they are to my tastes. And we should be doing this one on the podcast as well, although it will be such a pain in the ass to talk about as it is so difficult and very abstract. Yeah. Then we have another Andrei Tarkovsky film. It's Solaris, probably my second favorite from him. The favorite one we already talked about. So this was actually the first Tarkovsky film I watched. I was a bit scared to watch it. I think it was the first Soviet film I ever watched, and again I had heard before I watched it that oh it's so slow and everything, and at that point again I didn't know anything about slow cinema or anything, so or much about art house cinema or world cinema for that matter. But I did love it on my first watch, even though of course I found it a bit slow and everything. But then when the ending came, I was just blown away, and I spent lots of time reading about the film and thinking about the film, and also hold up well on a rewatch. But this is all about metaphysics. It's about memory and how our brains trick us to trick us to again think that, for example, that our memories are very accurate, and how our brains and our kind of human psychology tricks us to think wrong ways in general. Again, I'm not explaining it very, very well, but yeah, your mind plays tricks on you. I guess that's a good way to sum it up. Also, beautifully shot. It's quite emotional, even. And like I said, the ending is something that at least really blows me away. Yeah. Great movie. Then we have Kurosawa's Usala. And I sometimes say that I personally think that this might even be his best film, which probably isn't a very common opinion, but I would take this over Seven Samurai any day of the week, even though I love samurai films. But this is this great story about again different people coming together, understanding each other, becoming friends, developing a deep bond. It's also this kind of battle of different type of lifestyles, different types of worlds, again nature, and versus this kind of industrialized new world, modernity versus tradition, things like that. And again, about how it's hard to change your ways and it's hard to get used to living a totally different life when you are used to something completely different. So again, this character that you see here, he's lived in the nature his whole life, but then he's kind of domesticated for a while in this industrialized city, but he cannot get used to it. He wants back to the nature. Yeah, but very beautiful movie. Really beautiful movie. Then we have one of the pinnacles of French cinema. In my opinion, this has finally gotten a new restoration and it's available on the Criterion channel now. I haven't watched the restoration yet, but looking forward to it. And I think it's just a matter of time when this film and also other Eustache films will come out on a Blu-ray box set from Criterion. But again, it's the mother and the whore, La Maman et la Putain. We have the great Jean-Pierre here, who is this kind of a intellectual character, although you could argue pseudo-intellectual character. And we have these very long conversations about variety of topics. Again, in that French way that again you will either love or hate. But I love the French intellectualism with all of its pretensions and everything. Yeah, but it's a good relationship film. It's a good exploration of the kind of these young intellectual people of that time and their problems and their stupidity, but they kind of also, in a weird way, the kind of fun and beautiful side of their lives as well. Yeah, I really need to rewatch that one. I probably forgot that much about it, and hopefully I didn't get anything wrong in my description. This one I've also talked about quite often. It's Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout. Great film. Again, it's about this brother and sister. Their father abandons them, tries to shoot them even, but then they have to survive. By the two of them in the Australian outback. But again, they meet this Aboriginal boy there, and then they become a trio, and then they live together. So actually, it's kind of another film of where we see these types of like two different lifestyle, this kind of again modern city life, but then also this simpler life in nature and kind of this battle which is better. Actually, there are many films like that here for some reason. It's also such a beautiful film about nature and people, and again how different types of people can come together. Yeah, such an amazing film. Was lucky enough to see that on the cinema. Then we have a woman under the influence. It's either this or Love Streams that is my favorite Cassavetes film. But this is a very powerful, very raw film about this woman played by Gina Rowlands and her family. And she has these really bad, like, again, mental health issues. We see how that affects the family, how it affects her. And the Gina Rowlands performance is just one for the ages, and the same with Peter Falk as well. He's so good. It's a pretty ugly looking film in terms of the cinematography, as many Cassavetes films are, but it actually fits this film that's about like mental health and stuff. So it fits it well that there's lots of handheld and it's not very methodical and it's kind of ugly. Yeah, such a emotional movie, acting masterclass type of a movie as well. Such a great movie. Then we have Pink Narcissus, which is this kind of a weird fantasy film. with these types of beautiful, very lush, colorful, very queer looking visuals. So it's basically a collection of different like fantasies and stuff, but it's all about again the visuals, the queerness of it all. And I just absolutely love the visuals. It's really kind of my type of aesthetic. Like we see here, lots of pink and gold, and it's all over the top, flamboyant and everything. So I love that type of stuff. This is also the Rare Film website if you're interested. Although might be hard for straight people to relate to, but I don't know. But I really love it. One of my absolute favorites. Yeah, so beautiful. It was the only film that James Bidgood ever made, which is very sad as he had so much talent. And this film doesn't really need an introduction. It's A Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick. This is always on the 70s list for both kind of casual film fans, but also cinephiles. Yeah, very rewatchable film. Again, it's fairly horrific, but I actually find so much black humor in this one, as I do in many Kubrick films. Great societal critique of, again, violence, the state, authority and power, control, very relevant themes. And the soundtrack is great with this weird versions of Beethoven stuff. Yeah, but yeah, very entertaining movie. Then we have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Milos Forman film, again another very big classic. Absolutely love Jack Nicholson in this one. It's a good mix of like really funny scenes, but also it has that darker side to it. Lots of kind of tearjerker moments, especially near the end, and many great performances, many great characters. Yeah, such a wonderful movie that probably all of you have seen. Yeah. Then the last five films. We have another American movie. It's Sidney Lumet's Network. Yeah, one of the funniest films of all time. Such a great film about television. And it's actually very relevant today, even though television is less relevant now, but you can just replace television with the internet and it's still relevant. I'm mad as hell and I can't take it anymore. I mean, one criticism I would have for this film is that the visual style is very bland. It's just this kind of brown, like very just bland and kind of non-artistic or unartistic visual, visually. Yeah, but great performances by Faye Dunaway, William Holden, for example, one of the best scripts of all time. And okay, it's a great mix of humor and social critique. Then we have Carrie, again, Stephen King adaptation by Brian De Palma, starring the great Sissy Spacek, who's really good in this one. Very sad movie about bullying, and she is not just bullied in school but also at home with her religiously fundamentally fundamentalist mother. So lots of things that I can relate to in this film. Makes me really emotional when I watch it. And yeah, it's also again, beautifully shot, beautifully performed. The story is great, both when it is like very surreal, but also when it isn't. And yeah, such a emotional powerhouse of a film. Then we have another Kubrick film. It's Barry Lyndon. That again, I think many people these days would put this as one of the best Kubrick films. And it might be the best looking film of all time. And it's just absolute perfection. With those painterly shots that you could look at them for hours. You could put each shot into the wall of an art gallery. This is also like fairly funny movie. It's also really well paced, even though it's a longer movie. It's never boring. Great characters, especially again the main character is fun to see his rise and fall. And yeah, many highlight scenes, but I think for the most part this is all about the visuals to me. Then we have a Jacques Demy film, Donkey Skin. It's like very dark film when you describe the plot that can fought king loses his wife, but then he needs to find a new woman. And then he starts thinking that he should marry his own daughter. So again, it's about incest, very dark subject, but how it's done with these bright colors and this like very whimsical, very queer vibe, then it's kind of makes it feel like it's not that dark, even though when can you describe the plot, it's very dark. It's a very beautiful movie. I absolutely love Catherine Deneuve. Yeah, very again, whimsical, fantastic movie. Yeah, just utter beauty. Apparently on the Criterion channel at the moment, if you want to watch it. Then we have Duel by Jacques Rivette, which is basically the 70s French version of Mulholland Drive. Again, a film all about identity. Although this is like impossible to describe. Like again, this list has had many of those films that are impossible to describe. But beautiful looking film. I think it's very low budget, but there's great use of contrast. Like even you can see in this shot that there's nice like contrast between the red here on the background and the dark next to it. And then the characters in the middle. And Juliette Berto, Ulle Ogier are so great in it as well. But yeah, probably will do that on the podcast. So then I will have to come up with something more interesting to say about it. But anyway, that was my top 25. Like I said in the beginning, there were many that I had to leave out. And again, this order might be completely different tomorrow. But let me know your favorite 70s films. Let me know if you have seen any of these films and if you like any of them or if you dislike them. Or again, you can talk about whatever you want in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.